Hi, I'm Brian Morrissey. I'm the digital editor of Adweek here in Paris. Earlier today, spoke about what I see as 10 myths of social media marketing. I decided to talk about this because a lot of the people I talk to, there's a lot of things that are put out there that are put out as like absolute truths that I don't think are necessarily the whole truth. One of the myths I talked about is this idea that it's free. This is something probably near and dear to the heart of Edelman, is that just because you're not creating a big piece of creative or making a big media buy, social media isn't free at all. It can be quite expensive just because it's all about people, and so you're going to actually have to staff up with a lot of people. One of the examples I used for that was how Comcast is using Twitter and how that requires a staff of like a dozen now. Another myth talked about was that social media is all about listening and not about and listening and engagement and not about selling. There's a lot of intention data in social media, and I think that there's going to be a lot of ad models that arise out of it. There's a lot of brand talk already going on there, and I think brands can, if they do it correctly, do a fair amount of direct selling through social media. Another one is about brands giving up control. I think we hear it a lot, and I think there's a good message in that. But to be involved in social media does not mean that you have to give up all control. And I talked about the role of brands as curators of information around what the brand is about. One other thing that I talked about was the idea that you can't buy friends. I think you can buy friends on social media. I think that people are all about free stuff there, and if you make them an offer for their friendship, they'll gladly accept. I used as an example a recent campaign that Microsoft did through Farmville, which they got 425,000 friends with an offer, Facebook fans with an offer for some Farmville cash. One other social media myth that I talked about today was about authenticity. And again, this is one that's sort of grounded in, it's a pretty solid piece of advice about being authentic. But I think too much, it's taken too far a lot of times. And I think there's lots of examples of brands that are able to get involved in conversations in ways that are inherently inauthentic. I talked a little bit about something that's controversial, at least in the US, with sponsored posts and IZEA. I think this is actually going to be a big area for brands in order to enter conversations in a way that, to me, is completely inauthentic, but I think it can be quite effective. Another thing that I ended up talking about was this idea that it has to be a long-term commitment. I think social media, in that way, for brands can be sort of like a turnoff in getting involved because they think, well, budgets are quarter to quarter and we don't know. I think you can do social media initiatives that are short term, just as long as they're upfront that they're short term. I talked about a campaign that Wendy's did around bacon in social media. They are encouraging people to tweet about bacon and stuff like that. And I think that's pretty good. One of the other things that I talked about, to sort of wrap it up, was about social media being not just about the virtual world, and about being in the real world. I've seen a lot of things with geolocation I think is really, really interesting, with things like Foursquare and Gowalla, because they're taking all this social data that we have up in the cloud and they're overlaying it with the physical world. We're going to see more and more things like that. There's a new company called Sticky Bits that allows you to put barcodes onto physical objects and then upload any sort of digital data about that, whether it's images, photos, or videos. And I think it also works with existing barcodes, and that could actually lead to every object being a Wikipedia entry. So things like that I think are going to be really, really, really interesting.